And now it's time to enter our sacred time. And we are entering this time with words of Stephen Kendrick. We are here to face the truth about ourselves, about this faith we love, and the ways it presently serves others in the world, as well as to open ourselves to ways it can better and more joyfully reflect our potential and core values. We want to know the ways we are bound to one another as well as to the larger religious movements normally beyond our sight and vision. We say we are open and diverse. Yet it is too easy to feel stuck in old paths and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much tradition as our comfort. We want to answer the call to service to a world that needs our message, our hope, our revived energy. So we gather to learn, to unlearn, to hear, and to move forward. Let us worship together. This reading is a responsive reading, and it is number 732 in your gray hymnals. It is reading for Martin Luther King, Jr. Great Spirit of light and of darkness, we gather once again to remember a fallen friend and nourish ourselves from the fountain of reflections. Open our hearts to the anguish of our pain, to the tired taste of swallowed tears, and to our unrealized vision. In this place we bring our scattered lives together, groping for meaning and looking for truth. Be with us as we continue our search for understanding of the mystery of the temporal. Stay with us as we wander through our memories, seeking pathways to the future. Move with us as we unravel the implied imperatives of hope unfulfilled. Justice makes tireless demands, and we grow weary. As we touch one another in common cause, and with the great Spirit in our midst, let us find the way and the courage to realize the dream which still lives within us. Amen. Let us take a moment to pray, meditate, or practice silence. If you feel comfortable, you may close your eyes or just let them rest. Breathe with me. Relax your hands on your knees. Relax your shoulders. Feel your hands resting on your knees. Relax your feet and feel how they connect you to the floor. Now, when you take a breath, take it through your feet and let the breath fill you with strength and peace. For some of us, this has been a heavy and difficult week, leaving us in a need of a moment of rest and renewal. For some, this week have been a reminder that we do not know enough, that we are not always patient enough, that we grow weary. So we are here. Not always perfect, not always wise, but always wonderfully and mysteriously human. As we reach out to touch one another, may we tap into the courage to continue towards the dream that lives within us. Let us breathe now together in quiet and pray the prayers of our own hearts, whatever we brought with us, whatever is on our minds. Breathe.
Our second reading today is from The Healing is Not Done by Reverend Rebecca Savage. To put primacy on whiteness as the default setting in how we see and experience our world means that we are being theologically inconsistent. We covenant to affirm and promote the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. And yet, we have devalued the full inclusion of too many. I ignite my flame of justice and shine a light on this scar, because the healing is not done. The healing is not done because we are still called to do the work of dismantling white supremacy culture and decentering whiteness from our bones, from our congregations, from the ways in which we interact and support each other. We are called to fulfill the promises once made in the name of faith and proclaiming beloved community. We are called to match our words with our actions, to bring the holy into our midst by truly and without fear honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person. This is a beautiful time of opportunity, beloveds, born of truly listening to people of color and beginning to repair the fabric of community that has been that's been torn, ripped asunder by years of broken and empty promises, words of good intention, unmatched by purposeful action. Beloveds, now is our time to lead with love and make right the ways our denomination has fallen short of our shared principles. We are a powerful, aspirational, covenanted people, and we are being called to account for our historic, moral, and spiritual failings in order to move into authentic, beloved community. Now is our time to harness our ability to reflect inward in order to reemerge with a power greater than ourselves that gives rise to a new day.
There's a story that is, unfortunately, not very famous. On December 2nd, 2012, Spanish runner Ivan Fernandez Anaya was competing in a cross-country race in Spain. He was running second, some distance from the race leader Abel Mutai. This Kenyan runner had earned bronze medal at London's Olympic Games earlier that year. But now something happened. Mutai made a mistake in the finish line. He thought that the race came in 10 meters earlier than it actually did, and he stopped running. He looked around. People were yelling, telling him to keep going, but he did not speak Spanish, so he did not understand. This is when Fernandez Anaya caught up with him. But instead of exploiting Mutai's mistake to win himself a victory, Anaya slowed down and stayed behind Mutai. And using gestures, he guided the Kenyan runner to the finish line. That is them. This doesn't happen a lot in sports. I remember myself growing up and playing basketball on a girls' team, and if someone from the other team made a mistake and dropped the ball, We didn't wait for them to catch it back up. We grabbed it and tried to score for ourselves. So, as you know, if you were engaged in sports, that's what happens. It's probably fair to say that Anaya did not receive the approval of his trainers. However, he gained many fans who admired his integrity and agreed that winning is not everything. What does living with integrity look like for us? If we define integrity as living up to our values, what are our values that guide us in life? What does it look like when we live up to our values, even when it might cost us winning the race? Some of us may have stories of the ways we have sacrificed something in the name of integrity. These may be stories of keeping promises, refusing to betray a friend's trust, taking responsibility for our actions and not allowing someone else to get blamed for something we did, not cheating during exams or taxes. These are stories that required us to step up to practice our values. We probably also have stories where we did not quite live up to our values. We may have had to ask for forgiveness once or twice or more because we did not keep the promise. We may have had times when we forgot that winning is not everything and may have bypassed someone for our own benefit. And we possibly also know someone who has taken advantage of our mistakes. These stories remind us that we do make mistakes. Even with good intentions in our hearts to live up to our best, there are times when we fall short. And falling happens to all of us. And we do not always do it gracefully like dancers or gymnasts would, or fearlessly as rock climbers, or playfully as children. Most of the times we fall badly. And we find ourselves struggling after the fall, feeling embarrassed, disappointed, and maybe even hurting. A Methodist minister, Tom McDermott, once told a story about his uncle Mac, who had an odd way of commenting on things that happened to him. During one of the visits, Uncle Mac had gone upstairs to get something. So Tom went into the kitchen to get some tea, and a few minutes later, there was a sound of something heavy dropping down the stairs. So Tom ran out to see what had happened. Uncle Mac was sitting at the bottom of the stairs on the last step. Tom asked, "What was all that noise? Sounded like someone threw a TV down the stairs." "Oh, no, nothing like that," Uncle Mac said. "Just my clothes falling down the stairs." How can clothes make all that much noise, Tom wondered. Uncle Mac looked at him perplexed and said, "Well, I was in them at the time." Yeah. There are times when we fall and wish we had not been there when it happened. We fall in many ways and experience it almost every day. We fall into old, familiar patterns of living day to day, how we start the day, how we treat one another, even how we see the world. And some falling is more painful than others and more difficult to rise up from. It takes more time, more healing, and more effort to rise up with a renewed strength and new wisdom. In today's reading, Reverend Rebecca Savage points to such falling that we as UUs experience. We are falling short in living up to the promises we have made to one another. We covenant to affirm the interdependent web of all existence, and yet our actions show that we have devalued the full inclusion of many, she says. The people of color have been part of our living tradition for centuries, yet their voices continue to be overlooked, silenced, and even rejected with hostility. So I'm lifting up a voice of William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, also known as Webb Du Bois, a sociologist, historian, civil rights activist, and the first African American to earn doctorate at Harvard. He was a prolific writer and wrote a lot during his lifetime. Racism was one of the main targets of his works. And at the age of 89, he decided to write 3 novels. There's still hope for some of us, right? So he was writing with the younger generation in mind. And in the first of these novels, called The Ordeal of Man's Art, he says, "I've been wrestling with 4 questions all my life. And every generation has to come to terms with these questions. The first question is, how does integrity face oppression? How does integrity face oppression?" It's not an easy question to answer. As white middle-class woman, I experienced privileges in this country, many of them invisible to me. To come up here, I drive 1 hour each way. Yet I do not have to worry about law enforcement officers pulling me over just because of the color of my skin. When I'm going to the store, I do not need to worry about walking down the aisle and being considered a suspicious person. While living in St. Louis, Missouri, some 15 years ago, when I got stranded with my car in the left lane of a quite busy intersection, I had 3 cars stop and offer me help. I thought I was just young and pretty. My black chaplain colleagues reminded me that I was white. It doesn't happen to them. Nobody stops on the road to help them. So how do I, as a person who strives to live a life of integrity, deal with the discrepancy between how I am treated and how people of color are perceived and treated? How do I, myself, continue to participate in maintaining the system of white supremacy, even though I am deeply committed to justice and equality? This month, we began Spirit of Justice discussion about these very questions. Looking at ourselves takes courage. It takes courage to consider, what does it mean to be white? And to realize that we are part of a larger system of racism in which our actions continue to perpetuate the idea that whiteness is the norm, the ideal, and the standard for the rest of humanity. This realization is unsettling, troublesome, and challenging. Challenging because we see any challenge to our racial worldview as a challenge to our very own identities as good, moral people. When the stress caused by suggestion that being white has a meaning is intolerable, it often creates a range of defensive responses. And this process is what Robin DiAngelo calls white fragility. It serves to protect the white privilege and superiority. DiAngelo says that white progressives cause the most daily damage to people of color. I'll let it sit with you. So she defines white progressives as those who believe they get it. And because they get it, they do not need to do any more work on raising self-awareness, continuing education, building relationships, and engaging in actual anti-racist practice. But because the white fragility is triggered, and our defensiveness and our certitude of white progressives make it impossible for us to explain how is it that we do that? How is it that we defend ourselves? 60 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If you fail to act now, history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transformation was not the strident clamor of bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." He was addressing white moderates, racial moderates. And it still runs true today. But what is it in for us, whites? Why would we, who are white, want to examine our privilege and go out of our comfort zone? What does it cost to us to remain where we are? Apart from claiming integrity and practicing congruency with our stated values as inclusive, just organization, how about the psychological damage to us of having to be the standard, the norm, and the oppressor, sometimes moving us to use anesthesia, to use things that help us believe that being well-meaning is good enough? What are we to gain? Genuine connections and shared reality? Because currently, we and our racial perspectives are not trusted by people of color. Maybe we could see different sides of situation that we are now missing because of our white blind spots. What if, in realizing that each of us is connected to all others, and that if others are not thriving, we are not either? So we celebrate the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. this weekend. Some of us marched yesterday in MLK Parade, recall his speeches in the March on Washington and then Selma to Montgomery. We look up to Dr. King in honor and remember him as a leader and hero in the fight for equal rights for all, for justice, even when it meant he would acquire enemies. During his lifetime, he was not liked by everyone, much less by revered as he is today. Cornel West points out that most of the country did not like him. Black civil rights leadership was trashing him. The white establishment had rejected him. The young black revolutionaries were dismissing him, and FBI called him the most dangerous man in the country. They had 17,000-page FBI file at the time of King's death. Yet he kept working towards his dream. Today we are reminded that there is still work to be done, because racism is still very much alive in our present days, and that many are suffering just because of the color of their skin. When we continue to center whiteness as the standard for all humanity, we are theologically inconsistent with our values, our principles, and our aspirations for justice and equality. Years of broken and empty promises, of good intentions that are not matched with action, seep heavy into the wounds of our community. The healing is not done. The healing is not done because we still have work to do in decentering whiteness from our bones, from our congregations, from the ways in which we interact with one another, Rebecca Savage says. While we may grow weary from tireless demands of justice, the dream continues to live in our hearts. Yes, we still have a long way to go. So we draw on courage to follow where the integrity leads us and seek the way. I will end with Rebecca Savage's words, "Now is our time to harness our ability to reflect inward in order to re-emerge with a power greater than ourselves that gives rise to a new day. With love and peace in our hearts. Amen. May it be so."